Greetings everyone and welcome to the Occult Think Tank. My name is Greg. In this video I am going to be addressing the initial claims that Lee Strobel makes in his Case for Christ. This is the initial part where he's talking more about atheism than he is about his Case for Christ. The next video will be where I dismantle his case. But to start this off, here is what he says.
I'm just going to tell you a story. It's a true story. It's my story. And it's a story that begins in atheism. Because I concluded at a young age, as a teenager as a matter of fact, initially, that God does not and cannot exist. And I thought that God didn't create people, but people created God. Why? Because they were afraid of death. So they came up with this idea of a heaven and this benevolent jelly bean in the sky of a God. And I thought they just made all this stuff up to make themselves feel better about dying. That's what I thought.
Well, that shows a child's way of thinking, because atheism is not about a firm theistic type of claim that a God doesn't exist, because such a claim can't be proven. Atheism is simply the disbelief in the idea that a God does exist. It is saying, I know what your claims are, but frankly, I don't believe you. What evidence do you have to support the claims that you're making? And the truth of the matter is, there is no evidence to support the existence of a God, hence the reason a lot of atheists, or the reason atheists don't believe in a God, is there's no reason to. But to continue this.
I thought that the mere concept of an, all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful creator of the universe was crazy. It was absurd. It wasn't even worth my time to check out. Now, granted, I tend to be a skeptical person. My background's in journalism and law, so you can imagine to put those two things together, what kind of a jerk, skeptic that you get. I was legal editor of the Chicago Tribune, and we used to pride ourselves on our skepticism. We didn't want to accept anybody's word at face value. We always tried to get two sources to confirm a fact before we'd print it in the newspaper. So we actually had a sign in our newsroom that said, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. How do you know? Maybe she's lying. Got any proof? Got any data? Got any evidence to back? That's the kind of skepticism we had. And you know what?
That is insanity. If any company or journalistic newspaper would have that up, they are showing they are fucking idiots. Because somebody saying that their mother loves them is not an outrageous claim. It is not a wild claim. It is a claim of, okay, so what? It doesn't impact anything. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't matter. It wouldn't be admissible in a courtroom. It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't change anything with a story, whether or not something was true or not. It simply doesn't matter. So such a claim like that doesn't matter if they have evidence to back it up, because it's not outrageous. It's not a wild claim, because it was Carl Sagan that had said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. He did not say all claims require evidence. No. Claims that are not extraordinary, claims that are humdrum, claims like, me and my girlfriend went out to eat tonight and we got a pizza at Speedway. It's not an outrageous claim. It's not something that is hard to believe. But if I had said, yeah, before I turned this video on, Bigfoot walked through my office, that would be something that would require evidence. Because that is something that is getting into the absurd, the preposterous, the hard to believe. There's a huge difference. And if he didn't know this as a journalist, and his company didn't know this, then I seriously question their journalistic abilities. But to continue this.
That's a good thing, isn't it, for journalists to be skeptical? You want that, don't you? My problem was my skepticism morphed into cynicism, and it spilled over into my spiritual life.
Hold the phone. If he was supposedly an atheist, how the fuck could he have had a spiritual life? I am an atheist. I have no spiritual life because I don't believe in spiritual anything. In order to have a spiritual life, you have to believe in spiritual bullshit. I don't. I see no evidence to support that a spiritual anything exists. So I don't have a spiritual life. That is the first part in this, where I seriously question his claim that he was an atheist, ever. Because atheists do not have a spiritual life. But to continue this.
And so because I had no belief in God, I really lacked a moral framework for my life. I'm not saying...
Wait a minute. Now, to let him clarify just slightly.
All atheists are like this. I'm just saying, for me, the most logical conclusion from the idea that, okay, there is no God, that means there is no accountability. Ultimately, there is no afterlife. There are no eternal consequences, and so my conclusion was the best way to live my life was as a hedonist. Just pursue pleasure. This is all you get in this world. So that was my number one goal in life, to bring maximum pleasure into my life.
Now, there is a definite difference with somebody that is pursuing pleasure and being a hedonist, because frankly, I'll let you guys know, I am a hedonist, 100%. I'm in an open relationship with my girlfriend. I have a female friend with benefits on the side. It is something that, because of the relationship I have with my girlfriend, being an open relationship, it is an accepted thing in our relationship. It is fine with her, with my girlfriend, and so forth. I'm all about pleasure. The thing is, the idea that morality requires the Bible is the most absurd claim that can possibly be made. Because I contend Christianity is not based on morality, but immorality. The very basis, the very core foundation of Christianity is absolute immorality. All for me and fuck you too. And I'll be getting into that in part 2 video. The thing is, his ideas that he was all about pleasure, he may have been, but we're going to get to that other A word that he was, that it wasn't an atheist, but to let him further hang himself, because he will.
And so I lived a very immoral and drunken and profane and narcissistic, really self-destructive kind of a life. That was my life. There's a lot of anger inside me, a lot of rage inside me. If you asked me back then, why are you so mad about it? Why the rage? I couldn't have told you, but I know now what it was. I was always after the perfect high. Now, I was always after that ultimate experience of pleasure, and guess what? Everything let me down. Nothing lived up to the hype.
I want to pause it right there, because the hype? Lee Strobel, I dare you to respond to this personally, because I would love to talk to you on Skype, because frankly, I do not believe your claim at all. I am an atheist and have been since I was 24. As far as alcohol, I very rarely drink. I don't care to drink. I don't know if he's saying about drugs in this, but he's saying about the searching for the next high. I don't need any drug to get a high. I'm naturally high on life. But this idea that atheists are angry, It is a typical Christian claim. And let me be very, very clear. I'm not an angry person. I get angry when I'm dealing with the ignorance and the self-centered, all for me and fuck you too mindset of Christians. When I am dealing with the ignorance and the outright bullshit that is things like this, that's when I get angry. If somebody would ask me, why are you angry? I can point out, you want a list? You want me to go through the Christian crap that pisses me off and why? I can do it. It's not that I'm angry in life or that in my personal life with my girlfriend that I am angry. No. I'm actually a very jovial, very lighthearted type of guy. It is only when I am dealing with the subject like this that I can get heated, because this gets at what I regard as morally bankrupt. But to let him continue.
So I had a lot of rage. I remember once my wife was there and we got in an argument, and our little daughter was there, and I had so much rage, I just blew up. I remember I reared back and boom, I kicked a hole right through our living room wall. And my daughter's crying and my wife's crying. It's like, that's my life. In fact, I'm going to tell you the ugliest thing about me, which is when my little daughter, Allison, was just a toddler. If she was alone in the living room, playing with some blocks or toys or whatever, and she would hear me come home from work through the front door, her natural reaction was just to gather her toys and go in her room and shut the door. So you're going to be drunk again? You're going to yelling and swearing and, kicking holes in the walls, screaming, At least it's nice and quiet in here. Friends, that is the ugliest truth about me. My wife was...
I'm calling bullshit on that being the ugliest truth about him. Because typically, what he is describing is a wife beater. But they aren't kicking holes in walls only. They are using their inability to control themselves to slap around their wife. Lee Strobel, are you a wife beater? Do you beat up on women? Do you think that's makes you big and bad? Come on, Lee Strobel. I dare you to contact me. Because you aren't a fucking man. You raise a hand at a woman, you're not a man. I don't give a goddamn. And the reason the child would have gone to their room, they knew you were a fucking asshole. You weren't an atheist. You were a goddamn asshole. And let me make something real clear for you. Just because you say you found Jesus, you're still a fucking asshole. Now you're just an asshole that thinks you can get forgiven, having a pass on your behavior by mouthing fucking words. By saying you think something. That, Lee Strobel, is the most immoral, self-centered, all for me and fuck you mindset that you could have. No wonder you went to that. Because that is exactly the type of shit you were involved in. But to continue this.
Kind of in spiritual, neutral, agnostic. I don't know where she was really. She couldn't put the spiritual stuff quite together. And so one day we moved into a condo outside Chicago, and the woman downstairs, Linda, was a Christian. And she became best friends with my wife, Leslie. And it was very natural for Linda to talk to Leslie about Jesus, because Jesus is such a part of Linda's life. And Leslie wasn't hostile toward this stuff. Nobody had ever told her this stuff before. So she asked questions. She went to church with her. After many months, she came up to me and said, Lee, I made a big decision. I said, what? She said, I've decided to become a follower of Jesus Christ. And I thought, oh no. I mean, for an atheist, this is like the worst possible news you can get. I thought she was going to turn into some sexually repressed prude or something, spend all her time on Skid Row serving the poor or something. I didn't sign up for this.
I want to pause right there. Do you notice the first thing he went to is a sexually repressed prude? No wonder. I mean, it's just the first thing he went to was sex. I'm a hedonist, 100%. The thing is, the first place my mind goes, if my girlfriend, and I had this discussion with her earlier, and I told her I have zero fear of her going to Christianity. Zero. And I want to make sure, and I told her why, and I want all of you to understand why. It wouldn't faze me in the slightest. What I would do if she came home and said about she's believing in Jesus, her and I would sit down with my e-sword, or I'd pull out a fucking Bible, and we would go through it. And I would have a Bible lesson with her. And I would show her point by point by point by point why Jesus not only wasn't the Messiah, but why trying to say about his death and so forth, and the crucifixion, resurrection, rising from the dead, all that shit, that it's meaningless. And I would lay the cards right on the table and be, now, why do you go along with this? What is your reason? Wouldn't happen. It absolutely wouldn't. I would annihilate the ideas, the fantasies of Christianity, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing in the second video of this, that will be called Crucifying a Case for Christ, or the crucifixion of a case for Christ. Yes, I'm doing that intentionally, because I am going to nail a case for Christ up and completely dismantle it with book, chapter, and verse as to why it fails. But to continue this.
This is not part of the original deal. Honestly, first word that went through my mind, divorce. I was just going to leave. But I stuck around, and what really amazed me was in the following months I began to see positive changes in her character and in her values and the way she related to me and the children. And it was winsome and it was attractive. And so finally one Sunday morning, I'm sleeping off a hangover and she's getting ready to go to church. And she looks at me and she says, "Lee, why don't you come to church with me today?" And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go. Get her out of this cult, that she's involved in. So I go with her to this church meeting in a movie theater about a mile from my house. And the pastor gets up to preach. And he's a young guy. I don't even think he was shaven yet. His name was Bill Hybels. And he gave a talk called Basic Christianity. And I remember sitting there as a skeptic, and it was like one after the other, he was just knocking down my misconceptions about the Christian life. And so I remember walking out that day saying two things. Number one, I was still an atheist. He did not convince me that day that God exists. But number two, I realized, if this stuff is true, this has huge implications for my life. Duh. So I decided that day I'm going to take my legal training, take my journalism training, and investigate, is there any credibility to Christianity or any other world religion? And I launched on what turned out to be a nearly 2-year investigation of the evidence.
Now, let me just point something out. The idea that what he is saying, that and this is typical of what Christians will try and put forward, is that the claims were dismantled, the misconceptions of atheists about Christianity. I don't have misconceptions. I know what's in that goddamn book. And Christians, you better goddamn know what's in that book, or else I'll rub your nose in it. Anyone that knows my channel and knows the type of videos that I do knows damn well I will rub your fucking nose in your Bible. If you're going to come at me, you goddamn better know your book. Old and New Testament. Otherwise, I am going to walk you. You can bank on it. The idea that the first thing to enter his mind was divorce, that is because he was an asshole. And let me be clear on something. What he found appealing and attractive with a woman that has gone to, especially if it was the born-again type of Christian, yeah, what he would have liked is the subservient submissive, slave type of mindset that a lot of these new born-agains have, especially the females. They are regarded, because of what's in their New Testament, they are second-class citizens to men. Now, I'm not a feminist, and I don't support feminism. However, let's be clear. I also don't support assholes, Lee Strobel. And you, sir, are the biggest fucking asshole. And I would venture to bet you are softening this a great deal for your Christian audience. But to continue this bullshit a little bit.
Now, as I began the investigation, one thing became very clear to me very quickly. And that is this: if you want to determine, is Christianity true, and therefore every other contrary faith system in the world false, if you want to get to that issue, all you have to really do is answer one question. You know what it is? Did Jesus, or did he not, return from the dead? That's the ball game. Why?
And that leads into part 2 of this. But that's the ball game, Lee Strobel? That's where you're headed? Guess what? I got my hammer and nails ready. I'm going to hang you. I am going to hang you up with the Bible, debunking your 4 E's. Make no mistake, it is absolute bullshit. And I will explain why in the next video. Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. Later, people.